The chandelier lights caught every diamond in the room, but Emily Carter only saw one thing: her boyfriend of 3 years kneeling in front of her secretary. Marcus held Rachel's hand like she was the only woman in the world. "You're the one I love," he said, loud enough for 200 guests to hear. Emily was just a stepping stone. No one moved. No one breathed. Emily turned and walked out, her heels clicking against marble, her face completely still. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just disappeared into the New York night, leaving everything behind. Emily Carter had spent 32 years building a life that looked perfect from the outside. As CEO of Carter Fashion Group, the company her father had founded 40 years ago, she controlled a fashion empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She wore designer clothes, lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and dated Marcus Bennett, a handsome investment banker who looked good in photos and knew how to charm board members. But beneath all that success, Emily had never learned what it felt like to be truly loved. Her parents divorced when she was 7. Her father taught her to win. Her mother taught her to never show weakness. Neither of them taught her how to be happy. The anniversary party had been her idea. 3 years with Marcus deserved a celebration, she thought. She booked the grand ballroom at the Plaza, invited 200 guests, including business partners and media personalities, and planned every detail herself. She wanted the night to be perfect. She wanted Marcus to see how much she valued what they had built together. She never suspected that he had been planning something entirely different. When the lights dimmed and Marcus walked to the center of the room, Emily smiled, expecting a toast. Instead, he dropped to one knee in front of Rachel, Emily's own secretary, and pulled out a ring. The words still echoed in her mind as she drove through the darkness. Emily was just a stepping stone. 3 years of dinners, vacations, and carefully coordinated public appearances, all of it meant nothing. Marcus had used her name, her connections, her company to climb higher, and when he found someone younger and more convenient, he threw her away like last season's collection. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the 200 faces staring at her, with pity, their whispers following her out the door. By morning, every gossip site in New York would have the story: the CEO who got dumped at her own party. Emily didn't know where she was going. She just drove north, away from the city lights, away from her phone buzzing with messages she refused to read. The highway stretched empty ahead of her, dark trees lining both sides like silent witnesses. She had been driving for nearly 2 hours when the engine started making strange noises. The dashboard lit up with warning lights. Before she could pull over safely, the car shuddered and died on the side of a road she didn't recognize. She sat there in the silence, surrounded by nothing but darkness and the sound of her own breathing. For the first time in years, Emily Carter had absolutely no idea what to do. The tow truck arrived 40 minutes later, driven by a man named Daniel Rivera. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and tired eyes that suggested he had seen his share of long nights. He didn't recognize her. He didn't ask why a woman in a designer dress was stranded alone on a back road in Connecticut at midnight. He just hooked up her car and told her there was a garage in town where he could take a look. Emily climbed into the passenger seat of his truck without argument. She was too exhausted to do anything else. The garage sat at the edge of a small town called Milbrook. It wasn't much, a 2-bay building with faded paint and a hand-lettered sign that read, "Rivera Auto Repair." Inside, the smell of motor oil mixed with something warmer like coffee and old wood. Daniel told her the car needed a new part that would take 3 or 4 days to arrive. Emily nodded, too tired to process what that meant. Then she noticed the small figure curled up on a worn sofa in the corner of the waiting area. A little girl about 6 years old, sleeping under a knitted blanket with a stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Daniel followed Emily's gaze, and his expression softened in a way that surprised her. "That's my daughter, Lily," he said quietly, careful not to wake her. "The neighbor who usually watches her got sick tonight. I didn't have anyone else to call." He ran a hand through his hair, looking embarrassed. I know it's not professional bringing a kid to work, but when you're doing this alone sometimes, you don't have a choice." Emily stared at the sleeping child. She had never thought much about children before. They were abstractions, something other people worried about. But there was something about the way Lily clutched that rabbit, the peaceful trust on her small face, that made Emily's chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. The next problem became immediately apparent. Milbrook had exactly one place to stay, a small bed and breakfast, on Main Street, and it was completely booked because of some local fall festival happening that weekend. Emily stood in the garage, her phone dead, realizing she had left New York in such a rush that she hadn't thought about practical things like cash or planning. She had credit cards, but the only lodging in town was full. She could drive somewhere else once the car was fixed, but right now, she was stranded. She had handled hostile takeovers, media scandals, and board coups without breaking a sweat. But standing in this tiny garage in the middle of nowhere, wearing a $10,000 dress and holding a dead phone, she had never felt more lost. Daniel watched her for a long moment, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, he spoke. "Look, this isn't ideal, but I have a spare room at my place. It's small, and it's nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry. You can stay there until your car's fixed." Emily started to refuse automatically. She didn't accept help from strangers. She didn't need anyone. But before she could speak, a small voice interrupted. Lily had woken up, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. She looked at Emily with the unfiltered curiosity that only children possess. "Daddy, who's that lady?" Lily asked, her voice thick with sleep. Daniel crouched down to her level. "This is Miss Emily. Her car broke down, and she needs a place to stay for a few days." Lily studied Emily with serious brown eyes, taking in the expensive dress, the tangled hair, the mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Then she smiled, a gap-toothed grin that transformed her whole face. "You look like a princess from my storybook," Lily said. "The kind that gets lost in the forest and then finds her way home. You should stay with us. Daddy makes really good pancakes." Something cracked inside Emily at those words. She had been called powerful, impressive, intimidating. Never a princess who needed to find her way home. She looked at Daniel, who shrugged with a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "She's not wrong about the pancakes," he said. Emily heard herself accepting before she fully realized what she was doing. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the shock still reverberating through her system. Or maybe for the first time in her perfectly controlled life, she wanted to see what happened when she stopped planning and just let things unfold. Daniel's house was a small two-story, about a mile from the garage. The paint was peeling in places, and the porch steps creaked, but inside it was warm and surprisingly cozy. Family photos lined the walls. Daniel, Lily, and a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, who appeared in pictures up until about 4 years ago, and then vanished. A small frame on the mantel had a name engraved beneath the photo, Daniel Rivera. Emily noticed, but didn't ask. Some questions answered themselves. The spare room was tiny, with a single bed, covered in a faded quilt, and a window that looked out over a backyard with a rusty swing set. It was the smallest room Emily had slept in since college. It was also, she realized, as she lay down that night, the first place in years where no one expected anything from her. The next morning, Emily woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of a child's laughter. She came downstairs to find Lily sitting at a worn kitchen table, maple syrup on her chin, telling Daniel about a dream she'd had involving flying cats and a talking toaster. Daniel listened with complete attention, as if her dream were the most important news of the day. Emily stood in the doorway, watching them, this man and his daughter, in their simple kitchen, and felt like an explorer who had stumbled into a world she never knew existed. In her world, breakfast was coffee grabbed on the way to a meeting. In this world, breakfast was an event, a ritual of connection and care. Daniel noticed her standing there and nodded toward an empty chair. Coffee's hot. Pancakes are almost ready. No special treatment. No recognition of who she was or what she had lost. Just an ordinary morning invitation from an ordinary man. Emily sat down across from Lily, who immediately began explaining the plot of her dream in exhaustive detail. And for the first time since the chandelier lights caught Marcus kneeling in front of another woman, Emily felt something other than humiliation and rage. She felt curious. She felt present. She felt against all logic and expectation, like maybe she had landed exactly where she needed to be. Lily looked up from her pancakes with a question that hit Emily harder than any boardroom confrontation. "Are you sad?" the little girl asked, her head tilted to one side. "You have sad eyes." "My mommy had sad eyes sometimes too before she went to live with the angels." Daniel's hand tightened on his coffee mug, but he didn't interrupt. Emily found herself answering honestly, something she rarely did even with people she had known for years. "Yes," she said. "I'm a little sad right now." Lily nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. Then she pushed her plate of pancakes toward Emily. "Pancakes help," she said, with complete confidence. "Daddy says you can't be sad and eat pancakes at the same time. It's science." Emily looked at Daniel, who gave a small shrug. "Can't argue with science," he said. And despite everything, the betrayal, the humiliation, the uncertainty of what came next, Emily found herself smiling. It was small, barely there, but it was real. She picked up a fork and took a bite. The pancakes were, as promised, really good. And somewhere in that tiny kitchen, in a town she had never heard of, Emily Carter began to wonder if getting lost was actually the first step toward finding something she didn't know she was looking for. The first few days were harder than Emily expected. She had managed billion-dollar deals and navigated corporate politics with ease, but she couldn't figure out how to work Daniel's ancient washing machine. The contraption looked like it belonged in a museum, with mysterious dials and buttons that seemed to do nothing when pressed. She flooded the laundry room on her second attempt. Daniel found her standing in 2 inches of soapy water, still wearing her designer dress, because she had nothing else to wear, looking more defeated than she had ever felt in any boardroom. He didn't laugh. He just handed her a mop and showed her which dial actually worked. The Wi-Fi in Daniel's house was painfully slow, barely strong enough to load emails. Emily's phone, once she finally charged it, showed hundreds of messages she couldn't bring herself to read. The coffee maker produced something weak and bitter, nothing like the artisan espresso she was used to. The mattress in the spare room had a dip in the middle that made her back ache. Every small inconvenience reminded her that she didn't belong here. She was Emily Carter, CEO of a fashion empire. She should be in her penthouse, not in a creaky house in a town that didn't even have a Starbucks. But every time she thought about leaving, she remembered those 200 faces watching her walk out of the plaza, and the idea of going back made her stomach turn. Daniel was polite those first days, always making sure she had what she needed, but Emily could sense he was being careful. He left early for the garage and came home tired, exchanging only necessary words before disappearing to handle Lily's bedtime routine. Emily understood. She was a stranger in his home, an inconvenience he had taken on out of kindness. He probably couldn't wait for her car to be fixed so she would leave and his life could return to normal. One evening, she overheard him talking to Lily through the thin walls. "Don't get too attached, sweetheart," he said softly. "Miss Emily is going back to her own life soon. She doesn't belong in a place like this." But Lily didn't seem to understand the concept of keeping distance. She followed Emily around the house like a small shadow, chattering about everything and nothing. She showed Emily her collection of rocks, each one with a name and a backstory. She demonstrated her ability to count to 100 in both English and Spanish. She asked Emily to read her bedtime stories, and when Emily said she didn't know how, Lily patiently explained that you just had to look at the pictures and make up the words if the real ones were too hard. Emily had negotiated contracts worth millions, She had spoken at international conferences, but sitting on a pink bedspread reading about a bunny who lost his button, she felt more nervous than she had in years. The car was fixed by the fourth day, just as Daniel had promised. He handed Emily the keys and told her the total, which was surprisingly reasonable. Emily paid and thanked him for his hospitality, then walked out to her car. She sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the road that would take her back to New York. Her phone buzzed with another message from the board of directors demanding to know where she was. The scandal was still making headlines. The company needed her. Her life was waiting. She put the key in the ignition. She started the engine, and then she turned it off and walked back inside. Daniel looked up from the counter where he was preparing dinner, surprise flickering across his face. Emily spoke before she could lose her nerve. "I need to stay away from the media for a while. Things are complicated back home, and I need time to figure out what to do next. I know this is a lot to ask, but could I stay a few more days? I'll pay rent. I'll stay out of your way." Daniel studied her for a long moment, and Emily braced herself for rejection. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Lily would be disappointed if you left without saying goodbye," he said. "You can stay, but around here everyone pulls their weight. You want to be part of this house, you help out." Emily had never helped out with anything domestic in her life. She had housekeepers, personal assistants, and a chef on call. But something about Daniel's matter-of-fact tone made her want to try. She started small washing dishes, folding laundry once she mastered the machine, picking up toys that Lily scattered everywhere like confetti. She learned that Daniel woke up at 5 every morning to make Lily's breakfast and pack her lunch for school. She learned that he worked at the garage until 5, then rushed home to pick Lily up from the neighbor who watched her after school. She learned that no matter how tired he was, he never missed reading Lily her bedtime story. The more Emily watched Daniel, the more she saw how different he was from anyone she had known. He didn't care about status or appearances. He didn't try to impress anyone or climb any ladders. His entire existence revolved around his daughter and making sure she felt safe and loved. One night, Emily watched from the hallway as he sat on Lily's bed, doing funny voices for all the characters in a picture book about a dragon who was afraid of fire. Lily giggled and demanded he do the dragon voice again, and he did 3 more times without a hint of impatience. Emily thought about her own father, who had never read her a single bedtime story. He had been too busy building an empire. She wondered now if it had been worth it. The shift happened gradually, so slowly, that Emily didn't notice until it was already complete. She started helping Lily get ready for school in the mornings, while Daniel made breakfast. She drove Lily to the bus stop and waited until the yellow bus disappeared around the corner. She found herself looking forward to Lily's rambling accounts of her day, her strong opinions about which cafeteria food was acceptable and which was totally gross. One afternoon, Lily grabbed Emily's hand while they were walking home from the garage and didn't let go. Emily felt something crack open in her chest, something she had kept locked away for 32 years. This is what it feels like, she realized. This is what it feels like to be needed for something other than money or power. During one of their late-night conversations on the porch, Daniel told Emily about his past. He had been a mechanical engineer in Boston, working for a firm that designed automotive systems. He had a promising career, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and dreams of starting his own business someday. Then Sarah died in a car accident on a rainy night 4 years ago. She had been driving home alone because Daniel was working an extra shift to save money for a house. He blamed himself. He couldn't stay in Boston after that. Couldn't walk past the places they used to go together, so he moved back to his hometown, took over his uncle's old garage, and focused everything on raising Lily. Engineering felt like a lifetime ago now, a dream that belonged to someone else. Then came the night of the storm. Rain hammered against the windows like fists, and thunder shook the old house hard enough to rattle the dishes. Lily woke up screaming, burning with fever, her small body trembling under her blankets. Daniel's face went white when he touched her forehead. Emily had never seen him look scared before, but in that moment he looked terrified. His hand shook as he tried to find the thermometer. His voice cracked when he called Lily's name. Emily understood instantly. This wasn't just about Lily being sick. This was about the night Sarah died, the rainy night when everything went wrong. Emily took control without thinking. She found the thermometer, checked Lily's temperature, and announced they were going to the hospital. She bundled Lily in blankets and carried her to her car, while Daniel stumbled behind them, still frozen in his fear. Emily drove through the storm, her hand steady on the wheel, talking calmly to Lily about all the ice cream she could eat once she felt better. At the emergency room, she handled the paperwork, answered the doctor's questions, and sat beside Lily's bed, holding her hand, while they waited for the fever to break. Daniel sat on the other side, gripping his daughter's other hand, saying nothing. The fever broke around 3 a.m. Lily was diagnosed with a bad ear infection, given antibiotics, and cleared to go home. In the parking lot, rain still falling around them, Daniel finally spoke. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Sarah died on a night like this. Rainy. Late. I always thought if I had been there, maybe she wouldn't have been on that road. Maybe I could have driven instead. Maybe she would still be alive. He looked at Emily, his eyes red. When I saw Lily like that, all I could think was that I was going to lose her too. I froze. You didn't. Emily didn't know what to say, so she said the truth. I've spent my whole life being in control. It's the only thing I know how to do. But what you do for Lily every single day, the way you love her, that's something I never learned. You're a good father, Daniel, the best I've ever seen. They stood there in the rain, two broken people who had somehow found each other in the middle of nowhere. Daniel reached out and touched Emily's hand, just briefly, just enough for her to feel the warmth of his fingers. You're not what I expected, he said. I thought you'd be gone by now. Emily smiled, the rain soaking through her borrowed clothes. So did I. After that night, everything changed. Daniel stopped holding back. He started talking to Emily about real things, his guilt about Sarah, his fears about raising Lily alone, his abandoned dreams. Emily found herself sharing things too. Things she had never told anyone. Her lonely childhood, her father's impossible standards, the way she had spent her entire life trying to be perfect because she thought that was the only way anyone would ever want her. They talked late into the night while Lily slept, sitting on the porch watching the stars, and for the first time in her life, Emily felt like someone truly saw her. Nearly 3 weeks had passed since Emily's car broke down in Milbrook. She had stopped counting. The days stopped checking the headlines about her disappearance. Then her old world came crashing back. She was helping Daniel organize the garage when a black car pulled up outside, too expensive and too clean for this small town. Marcus stepped out, looking exactly as polished as he always did, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Emily felt her stomach drop. Daniel looked at her, then at Marcus, and his expression went carefully blank. Someone you know, he asked. Emily nodded, her mouth dry. My ex. Marcus approached with his most charming smile, the one he used on investors and media. Emily, thank God I found you. I hired a private investigator to track your credit card transactions. Do you have any idea what your disappearance has done to the company? The stock price dropped 8%. The board is in chaos. He glanced around the garage with barely concealed disdain. What are you even doing here? This place is pathetic. Emily felt Daniel stiffen beside her, but she kept her voice calm. What do you want, Marcus? He had the audacity to look hurt. I want you to come home. That thing at the party, it was a mistake. Rachel means nothing. I already ended things with her. I was confused. But we can fix this. We can tell the media it was a misunderstanding. Emily stared at him, this man she had wasted 3 years on, and felt nothing but cold contempt. You proposed to my secretary in front of 200 people and called me a stepping stone. That wasn't confusion. That was who you really are. Marcus's charm dropped like a mask, revealing the calculation underneath. Fine. You want to play it that way? The board is getting impatient, Emily. They're talking about replacing you. You need me back in New York, smoothing things over. You need to come back now before you lose everything your father built. He looked at Daniel with open contempt. Unless you'd rather stay here playing house with the mechanic. Before Emily could respond, her phone rang. It was Robert Chen, one of the senior board members she trusted most, delivering exactly the message Marcus had threatened. They needed her back in New York. The company was suffering. Her personal life was damaging the brand. She had responsibilities, obligations, a legacy to protect. Emily listened, said she would consider it, and hung up. The weight of her old life settled back onto her shoulders like a familiar burden. She had run away, but she couldn't run forever. Her father's company needed her. 2,000 employees depended on decisions she had to make. Could she really abandon all of that for a small-town mechanic and his daughter? That night, Marcus checked into the bed and breakfast that finally had vacancies. Before he left, he delivered one final threat, his voice low, so Daniel couldn't hear. I had my investigator look into your friend. Did you know he was investigated when his wife died? The police thought it was suspicious. A young wife, a convenient accident, a husband who stood to benefit. He was cleared, sure. But do you really think the media won't love that story? CEO abandons billion-dollar company for man suspected of killing his wife. I'll give you 3 days to come back, Emily. After that, I make some calls. Emily didn't tell Daniel about the threat. She didn't know how, but Daniel wasn't oblivious. That evening, while Emily was upstairs, he saw her face flash across the local news, a segment about the missing CEO, whose disappearance had become tabloid fodder. He stood in the living room, the television glowing behind him, and everything clicked into place. When Emily came downstairs, she found him waiting. "You're not just some businesswoman, are you?" he said quietly. "You're Emily Carter. Your company is worth hundreds of millions. You've been on magazine covers. And you let me think you were just a regular person whose car broke down." Emily tried to explain, but the words came out wrong. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. I needed to get away from that life. I needed to be somewhere no one knew who I was." Daniel shook his head slowly. "I let you into my home. I let Lily get attached to you. And the whole time you were just hiding here, until you felt ready to go back to your real life." His voice hardened in a way Emily had never heard. "You should go back to New York, Emily. You don't belong here. Lily and I don't belong in your world, and you don't belong in ours. The longer you stay, the harder it's going to be when you leave." Emily felt like she had been slapped. "That's not fair. What happened between us, the way I feel about you and Lily, that's real. That's not about money or status." Daniel's expression didn't change. "Maybe it is real. But what happens next? You go back to running your empire, flying around the world, attending galas with people who have never worked a day in their lives. And Lily and I stay here, waiting for you to remember we exist. I won't do that to her. I won't let her get hurt like that." He walked toward the door, then stopped. "Your car works fine now. You should leave in the morning." That night, Emily lay in the small bed with its familiar dip in the middle and stared at the ceiling. She could hear Lily crying softly in her room and Daniel's low voice trying to comfort her. Emily had faced hostile takeovers, public scandals, and ruthless competitors. None of it had hurt like this. In the morning, she packed her small bag of borrowed clothes. She found Lily waiting at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes red and swollen. The little girl threw her arms around Emily's waist and held on tight. "You promised you'd stay," Lily sobbed. "You said you'd read me more stories. You said you'd teach me to braid hair like yours. You promised." Emily knelt down, her heart shattering into pieces. She wanted to promise she would come back. She wanted to say that everything would be okay. But she couldn't lie to this child who had given her so much trust. "I have to go," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. "But I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me." Lily pulled back her small face, fierce with grief. "Then why are you leaving?" Emily had no answer. She kissed Lily's forehead, stood up, and walked out the door without looking back. If she had looked back, she never would have made it to the car. She drove away from Milbrook with tears streaming down her face, leaving behind the only place that had ever felt like home. New York felt different now. Emily returned to her penthouse overlooking Central Park, the same view she had loved for years, but it looked cold and distant, like a photograph of someone else's life. She went back to the office, sat in her leather chair, and tried to focus on the quarterly reports spread across her desk. The numbers blurred. The words meant nothing. Every time her phone rang, she hoped irrationally that it might be Daniel. It never was. She attended meetings, made decisions, smiled at investors, and felt like a ghost moving through a life that no longer fit. 3 weeks in Milbrook had changed something fundamental inside her, and she couldn't pretend otherwise. The board was relieved to have her back. They talked about damage control, rebranding strategies, and moving forward from the scandal. Marcus had returned, too, acting as if nothing had happened already, positioning himself for his next move. Emily watched him charm the same people he had humiliated her in front of, and she felt nothing but tired contempt. During one meeting, she found herself staring out the window, thinking about Lily's gap-toothed smile and the way Daniel's hands looked when he worked on an engine. Her assistant had to call her name 3 times before she responded. She was present in body, but absent in everything that mattered. Meanwhile, in Milbrook, Lily asked about Emily every single day. Daniel tried to explain that Miss Emily had her own life, her own world, and she couldn't stay with them forever. But Lily didn't understand. She left Emily's favorite mug on the table every morning, just in case. She made drawings of the 3 of them, together, stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a crooked chimney. Daniel found the drawings on his pillow on the refrigerator tucked into his lunch bag. Each one felt like a small knife in his chest. He had pushed Emily away to protect his daughter, but watching Lily grieve, he wondered if he had only made things worse. The nights were the hardest for Daniel. He lay awake thinking about the choices he had made. He had convinced himself that Emily would leave eventually, that it was better to end things on his terms than wait for her to abandon them. But in the darkness, he could admit the truth. He had been afraid, not just for Lily, but for himself. After losing Sarah, he had sworn never to let anyone that close again. Emily had slipped past his defenses without him noticing, and when he realized how much he cared, panic had taken over. He had pushed her away because loving her felt too dangerous. Now she was gone, and the house felt emptier than it had in 4 years. Emily spent her first week back in New York going through the motions. She approved campaigns, signed contracts, and attended a charity gala where everyone whispered about her behind their champagne glasses. On the 8th day, she finally forced herself to look at the company's financial records in detail. Something had been bothering her since Marcus's threat about making calls. How had he been so confident? What was he really hiding? She started digging, following a trail of numbers and transactions that didn't add up. What she found made her blood run cold. Marcus had been embezzling from Carter Fashion Group for over 2 years. Small amounts at first hidden in expense reports and vendor payments, then larger sums as he grew more confident. The total was staggering, nearly $3 million siphoned into offshore accounts. Emily realized with sick clarity that Marcus had never loved her. He had targeted her from the beginning, using their relationship to gain access to company finances. The proposal to Rachel wasn't just betrayal, it was an exit strategy. He had planned to leave Emily publicly humiliated while he quietly disappeared with the money. His threat about Daniel was just leverage to keep her distracted. Armed with evidence, Emily called an emergency board meeting. She walked into the conference room with her shoulders straight and her voice steady, the CEO they had always known, but transformed into something harder and more certain. She presented the financial records, the transaction trails, the proof of Marcus's theft. The board members, including Robert Chen, listened in stunned silence. Marcus tried to deny everything, then tried to blame subordinates, then tried to threaten Emily with the information about Daniel. Emily cut him off with 3 words. "I don't care." She told the board everything about Milbrook, about Daniel, about Sarah's death, and the investigation that had cleared him. She refused to let Marcus use shame as a weapon anymore. The board voted unanimously to terminate Marcus and pursue legal action. Security escorted him from the building while he shouted threats that no one listened to. Emily watched him go and felt nothing but relief. For the first time since returning to New York, she could breathe. But as the adrenaline faded, she realized that exposing Marcus wasn't enough. She had proven she could protect her company. Now she needed to prove she could protect what really mattered. She thought about Lily's drawings, about Daniel's tired eyes, about the small bedroom with the dip in the mattress that had somehow become more home than this penthouse ever was. Emily made her decision that night. She called Robert Chen and proposed something unprecedented. She would remain CEO, but work remotely, coming to New York only when absolutely necessary. The company had survived scandals before. It could survive having a leader who lived in Connecticut. Robert was skeptical at first, but Emily had just saved the company millions of dollars and exposed a thief. Her credibility had never been higher. After hours of negotiation, they reached an agreement. Emily would restructure her role, delegate more responsibilities, and prove that Carter Fashion Group could thrive with a CEO who prioritized life over constant presence. The next morning, Emily drove back to Milbrook. No designer dress this time, no luxury sedan. She had traded her old car for something practical, packed a single suitcase, and left her penthouse keys with the building manager. The drive felt different than it had 3 weeks ago, when she had fled New York in shock and shame. This time she was driving towards something, not away. She had no guarantee that Daniel would take her back. She had no idea if she could actually build a life in a small town. But she knew with absolute certainty that she had to try. She found Daniel at the garage, bent over, an engine grease on his hands and exhaustion on his face. He looked up when her car pulled in, and for a moment neither of them moved. Emily got out and walked toward him, her heart pounding harder than it ever had in any boardroom. Daniel straightened up slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression guarded, but not closed. Emily stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. She spoke before her courage could fail. "I'm not here because I'm running away. I'm here because this is where I want to be." Daniel didn't respond immediately. He studied her face, searching for something Emily hoped he would find. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. "I was wrong to push you away. I told myself I was protecting Lily, but the truth is, I was scared. After Sarah, I swore I would never let anyone close enough to hurt us again. Then you showed up with your broken car and your sad eyes, and you fit into our life like you had always been there. It terrified me." He took a step closer. "Watching Lily cry for you every day, I realized I wasn't protecting her. I was hurting her. I was hurting both of us." Emily felt tears building, but didn't try to stop them. "I exposed Marcus. He was stealing from my company and I caught him. He tried to use your past against me, and I told the entire board the truth. I'm not ashamed of you, Daniel. I'm not ashamed of this town or this life. I've spent 32 years being the person everyone expected me to be. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be here with you and Lily, figuring out what it means to actually live." She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses and the warmth. "If you'll let me." Before Daniel could answer, the door to the garage burst open. Lily came running across the concrete floor, her shoes untied and her hair wild, the neighbor who watched her trailing behind with an apologetic expression. But Lily wasn't looking at anyone except Emily. She launched herself at Emily's legs with enough force to nearly knock her over, small arms wrapping tight around her waist. "You came back," Lily shouted, her voice muffled against Emily's shirt. "Daddy said you might not come back, but I knew you would. I knew it. I drew pictures every day so you wouldn't forget us." Emily knelt down and pulled Lily into a proper hug, breathing in the smell of crayons and playground dirt. "I could never forget you," she said, her voice thick. "I tried to stay away, but I couldn't. You and your dad are the best thing that ever happened to me." Lily pulled back, her eyes serious. "Does that mean you're staying forever?" Emily looked up at Daniel, who was watching them with an expression she had never seen before, hope and fear and love all tangled together. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Emily turned back to Lily and smiled. "Yes, I'm staying forever." Daniel reached down and helped Emily to her feet, keeping hold of her hand. "I have one condition," he said, and Emily braced herself. His mouth curved into the first real smile she had seen from him since the night of the storm. "You have to let me teach you how to use the washing machine properly. I can't handle another flood." Emily laughed, the sound surprising her, bright and genuine in the dusty garage. Lily grabbed both their hands and started pulling them toward the door. "Can we have pancakes?" she demanded. "Pancakes are for celebrations, and this is definitely a celebration." Daniel looked at Emily, his smile softening into something deeper. Pancakes it is. 6 months later, life in Milbrook looked nothing like Emily had imagined, and everything like she had hoped. She still ran Carter Fashion Group, but from a small home office, with a view of the backyard swing set that Daniel had finally repainted. She flew to New York once a month for board meetings and major decisions, but the company had learned to thrive with a leader who trusted her team. The stock price recovered, the scandal faded, and Emily discovered that she was a better CEO when she wasn't exhausted and lonely. Daniel's garage had expanded. With a small investment from Emily, given as a loan, he insisted on repaying. He hired 2 employees and started taking on more complex repairs. He even began consulting on automotive projects, remotely putting his engineering background to use again. He still woke up at 5 every morning, but now Emily woke up with him. They made breakfast together while Lily slept, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other in the quiet hours before the world woke up. Emily had also established a scholarship fund for children who had lost parents named in Sarah's memory. Daniel had cried when she told him the first time she had ever seen him cry for something other than grief. On a warm evening in late spring, the 3 of them sat around the kitchen table eating dinner. Lily had spent the meal describing in exhaustive detail the life cycle of butterflies, which she had learned about in school. Daniel listened with the same complete attention he always gave her. Emily watched them both, still amazed that this was her life now. Then Lily looked up with a question that stopped Emily's heart. "Daddy, is Miss Emily going to be my new mom?" Daniel glanced at Emily, his eyes soft. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" Lily turned to Emily with fierce hope on her small face. Emily reached across the table and took Lily's hand. "If you want me to be," she said, "there's nothing in the world I would want more." Lily's smile could have lit up the entire town. "I want you to be," she said. "I've wanted it since the first night, when you looked like a lost princess." Emily laughed through her tears. She had been lost, and now finally she was home.